And Robert Kelly, an expert on Korean affairs, is now joining us from South Korea. And Robert Kelly, thanks very much for talking to us. Your thoughts about what has now been reported as possibly Kim Jong-un, all this while hoodwinking the U.S. president and other nations as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, there's been a lot of pushback in the last 24 hours about this. The only thing I would add to that, I mean, a lot of that is correct. I think a lot of your reporting there was excellent. But I think the only thing I think that we're missing is that to a certain extent, the president kind of set himself up for this fall. I mean, if you actually look at the commentary from the analyst community, people like me and others, you know, on Twitter and stuff like that, a lot of us were making these kinds of arguments 6 months ago before the president even went to Singapore, because the North Koreans had sort of been sending good signals, but they hadn't agreed to anything actually very hard or concrete. And if you look at the language from the Singapore summit, they didn't say anything binding there either. The North Koreans never actually agreed to give up their nuclear program. They've only agreed to freeze and discuss denuclearization and so on in the future. And Donald Trump, you know, sort of wildly exaggerated that. I mean, that the president is sort of given to sort of large rhetoric, and on this he really sort of got carried away. I think the North Koreans got found out a little bit faster than anybody expected, but I think a lot of people in the analyst community kind of thought something like this would happen.
Right. And Robert, of course, the U.S. president, as many believe, is given to rhetoric, but not so much the South Korean leader, who's also been immensely invested in the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. What do you think his thoughts would be, considering the fact that many believed that they had brought Kim Jong-un to the talking table, and that was enough to sort of de-escalate tensions in the region?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this has got to be somewhat disappointing for President Moon Jae-in. The United States is South Korea's primary and really only ally, and South Korean public opinion strongly supports the American alliance. And so if the Americans are unhappy, there's only so far Moon Jae-in can go with détente with North Korea. And there's no doubt that the United States is going to see today's report as indication that the North Koreans aren't taking denuclearization seriously. I think the Moon government's response would be to say that, look, we have détente and improving relations with North Korea. The nuclear weapons don't matter so much because we're going to get along with them in the future, in which case the weapons aren't quite so threatening. So the Moon government's tried to blur the focus on denuclearization. It's the Americans that have really hammered away at that theme, and now that it's becoming pretty clear the North Koreans aren't doing it, this could lead to a breach between the United States and the South Korea, because the two sides are pretty far apart on how to respond to the missiles.
Right. And many, of course, domestically in the U.S. also believe that Donald Trump has invested way too much in his so-called new relationship with Kim Jong-un. All of this while, of course, trying to scrap what was already there in a deal with the Iranian government. And some of that focus should have shifted to sort of keeping that deal alive with the Iranians, rather than, of course, being so upbeat about what he had signed or discussed with the North Korean leader.
Yeah, I would actually agree with that analysis myself. I think the president is given over to too much personalism. The president seems to think that American foreign policy with various countries is determined on whether or not he gets along with the leaders, right? So he doesn't seem to like Justin Trudeau very much, so apparently Canada, which has been American ally for a really long time, is now our opponent or something like that. And I think the president has sort of gotten too swept away with Kim Jong-un's rhetoric and the letters that he sent him and things like that. And as you said, the Iranian deal was reasonably okay. It wasn't great. There were problems with it, but it was working reasonably well. The Europeans broadly supported it, as did others. And the president got rid of it probably primarily for personal reasons, which is that it was negotiated by Barack Obama, whom President Trump really doesn't like. I mean, this is sort of a long-term problem for the president and his foreign policy, right? If things are going to be highly personalized like this, then it makes things vulnerable to sort of radical shifts in the president's opinion. And I think what people worry about now going forward in North Korea is that the president will feel burned, right, sort of taken advantage of, and then he might swing back to the kind of rhetoric we saw in 2017 of fire and fury and stuff like that.
Right. Robert Kelly, thanks very much indeed for joining us this morning with your perspective on what the way ahead could possibly be, and of course what Donald Trump's reactions could be. Fire and fury once again is what the world could also expect.